Hello students, welcome to Boundless Maths, your trusted space for both maths and science. In today's video, we are going to cover the chapter Life Processes from Class 10 Science Curriculum. This is one of the most important and I'll say the lengthiest chapter in the entire biology curriculum for Class 10 Science. So it's very important that you understand all the concepts, all the reasoning questions well, and then you are able to learn the content also, right? For this, I'll be using the Class 10 Science notes authored by me, specifically to make the NCERT content understandable and learnable. So it's very important that you retain it also after you have understood, right? So you can order your copy of science notes by visiting my website www.boundlessmaths.com. So without much delay, let's get started. So the basic question is, what is a life process? Processes that are necessary to maintain life are called life processes. For example, taking in food, breathing, digestion, transportation, excretion, all these are necessary for any living organism, right? But if we talk of reproduction, is it a life process? No. It is definitely needed for maintaining existence of the species, but it is not a life process because it is not necessary for a living being to survive individually, right? So that means the four basic life processes are: number one, nutrition, then we have respiration, transportation and excretion, and we'll look into the details of each of them one by one during these sessions. So to begin with, what is nutrition? It is the process of transfer of energy from outside of an organism to inside in the form of food, and the food that we eat, normally it is carbon based. So we eat food that is also known as hydrocarbons. So we take in hydrocarbons made up of hydrogen, carbon and oxygen, which are further broken down to give energy to us, right? So this is nutrition. Now there are lots of redox reactions that take place inside our body to break down this food to give us energy. We already talked about redox reaction in chapter 1, chemical reactions and equations. If you have not watched the video, you can watch the video on chemical reactions and equations to understand more about redox reactions. These are the reactions that involve reduction and oxidation together in the same reaction. What is respiration? It is a process of acquiring oxygen from outside, and then it is used for breaking down of food to release energy. So taking in oxygen from outside is breathing, but respiration is breaking down of food in the presence of oxygen. So we'll get into details of each of them gradually. So to start with, what is the difference between the body organization of unicellular and multicellular organisms? Unicellular organisms are made up of single cell, and the entire surface area of the cell is exposed to the environment, right? So basically the exchange of food or exchange of any kind of materials, whether it is waste product or food, it can take place effectively by the process of diffusion itself, because the entire surface is exposed to the environment. But what about multicellular organisms? These organisms have cells collected together to form tissues, tissues make organs, organs make organ system, and then the entire organism. So in this complex structure of multicellular organisms, all the cells of the body are not exposed to the environment. So what does that mean? Only the outer layer would be exposed, but what about the inner layers? How will they exchange their materials with the environment? So for this, in multicellular organisms, diffusion is not sufficient to meet all the needs of the organism, and that's why we have all these life processes in place. So we have different life processes, namely nutrition, that is intake of food, then we have respiration, you take in oxygen and break down the food, that is called respiration, and then you have the transportation system that is needed to bring food and oxygen to appropriate sites where respiration can take place and energy can be used, or to even transport the waste material that has been created because of respiration, to transport that and throw it out of the body. So that is excretion. So these are the four basic life processes that we are going to talk about in detail. So let's start with nutrition. Now our body needs energy to maintain a state of order in the body, to control different organs, organ systems. The brain controls everything. We have talked about it in detail in the control and coordination chapter also. For growth, development and synthesis of proteins and other substances that are needed by the body. So these are the two main reasons why we need energy: for repair, growth and maintenance functions, right? Now there are two types of organisms, autotrophs and heterotrophs. Auto, as the word means, self. So these are the organisms that can prepare their own food from inorganic sources like carbon dioxide and water. So all green plants and bacteria come under the category of autotrophs. Now there are heterotrophs that generally take up food from plants and animal sources, and they cannot prepare their own food. So animals and fungi come under heterotrophs. Autotrophic nutrition basically covers photosynthesis. What is photosynthesis? You must have done in lower grades also. Photosynthesis is a process by which plants make their food, right? Now we are going to see how photosynthesis is broken down into different steps. There are certain steps that need to be followed in the process of photosynthesis. So it is a process by which autotrophs take in substances like carbon dioxide and water from the outside, and they convert them into stored form of energy, that is glucose, right? So this process is called photosynthesis. Here is the equation for photosynthesis. Carbon dioxide plus water in the presence of sunlight and chlorophyll gets converted to carbohydrates, which is utilized by the plant, because the plant also needs energy. Plants also has to grow. So some part of these carbohydrates are utilized by the plant, and rest, whatever is extra, is stored in the form of starch, which serves as an internal energy reserve for the plant. So again, MCQ here. An internal energy reserve for the plant is in the form of starch. You will not write carbohydrates here. Starch is the correct answer. Now let's come to humans. When we eat this food created by plants, then we also use the energy created from that food by breakdown of that food. But whatever is extra is stored in the form of glycogen and ATP. Now what is glycogen? Glycogen is the internal energy reserve in animals, specifically humans, whereas starch is the internal energy reserve in plants. So please remember these two words, starch and glycogen, very important from MCQ perspective. So the energy is stored in the form of glycogen and ATP also. We'll come to ATP in detail when we talk about respiration. So what are the different events that take place during photosynthesis? The first step is absorption of light energy by chlorophyll. So the plastids, the chloroplasts, they first absorb sunlight, right? So that is the trigger point where photosynthesis starts. Now the conversion of light energy to chemical energy takes place, and water molecules, they split into oxygen and hydrogen. So water is broken down to hydrogen and oxygen, which will further be used. These hydrogen and oxygen ions and these electrons, they are further used in the third step, that is reduction of carbon dioxide to carbohydrates. So the process of breaking down of water to oxygen and hydrogen is also known as photolysis. The third step is reduction of CO2 to carbohydrates. So these are the three steps that may not take place in the same sequence all the time. It is quite possible that desert plants, they take up CO2 at night and prepare some kind of intermediate products which are finally converted to carbohydrates when they get sufficient water or sufficient sunlight and in presence of sufficient chlorophyll. So these processes may not take place, the steps may not take place in the same order, but you should remember and you should write the steps in the same order in your answer. So how do you remember them? ACR. So just remember ACR. Absorption of light, conversion of light to chemical energy, breaking water into hydrogen and oxygen ions and electrons. Then R is reduction of carbon dioxide to form carbohydrates. So these three steps are very important from photosynthesis perspective. If there is a question on what is photosynthesis or explain the steps, you have to write all the three steps and you have to write the statement that these may not take place in the same sequence. Next thing you should always write is definition of photosynthesis and the reaction involved. So all the three things are important: definition of photosynthesis, the three steps and the reaction involved in photosynthesis. Now what is stomata? These are the tiny pores present on the surface of the leaves that help in exchange of gases. Second function of stomata is to throw out excess water through the process of transpiration. Now the lower surface of the leaves, it has more stomata as compared to the upper surface. for terrestrial plants, but in aquatic plants, because the lower surface is in direct contact with water and it is the upper surface only that is in touch with the atmosphere, so that's so in aquatic plants the upper surface has more stomata as compared to the lower surface. Opening and closing of stomata is controlled by the guard cells. All this you must have done in lower grades also. So what happens during the day is the guard cells swell up through the process of osmosis. They take in water from the surrounding cells and swell up. So when the guard cells they swell up, they cause the stomatal pore to open, and then exchange of gases or loss of water can take place. At night the guard cells they shrink, they lose water and they shrink, and that close the stomatal pore, so no more exchange of CO2 or water loss takes place during the night, right. Now let's come back to photosynthesis again. Apart from just creating carbohydrates, carbon, hydrogen, oxygen, do plants create nutrients or they need more minerals also? Yes. So they need a lot of minerals like nitrogen, phosphorus, iron, magnesium. All these are obtained from the soil. Nitrogen is absorbed in the form of nitrates and nitrites. Again, you must have done in lower grades that there are certain leguminous plants that have nitrogen fixing bacteria called rhizobium that fix the atmospheric nitrogen into nitrates and nitrites. And these nitrates and nitrites are easily absorbed along with water by the roots. These are used for the synthesis of proteins. So basically proteins are made up of amino acids, and amino acids they need nitrogen for their synthesis. So these nitrates, nitrites, organic compounds, water, nitrogen, phosphorus, iron, magnesium, all these come from the soil. Carbon dioxide comes from the surrounding air, but all these nutrients the plant gets from the soil, right. Now let's come to heterotrophic nutrition. Autotrophic means organisms that can make their own food. Heterotrophic are the organisms that depend on other organisms for food. The first one is saprophytic nutrition. What is saprophytic nutrition? Saprophytes, they actually break down the food material outside the body and then absorb it. So certain fungi like bread molds, yeast and mushrooms are examples of saprophytic mode of nutrition. These examples are very important from MCQ and assertion reason perspectives. Other organisms that take in food and then break in inside their body are called holozoic. So holozoic you can remember like this, they take in whole food inside and then break it. So holozoic is whole food. Take the whole food inside and then break it, that is holozoic nutrition. So this is shown by most of the organisms. Then there are certain organisms that derive nutrition from other plants and animals without killing them. So these are called parasites. For example, cuscuta or amarbale, ticks, lice, leeches, tapeworms. Now again it is very important that you remember the examples given here from MCQ and assertion reason perspective. You should remember the meaning of all these three words. Saprophytic means break down food and then take it inside. Holozoic means take the whole food inside and then break it and use it. Parasitic means you depend on for nutrients you depend on some other plant or animal, and then you can create your own food. Like there are certain autotrophic plants like cuscuta. It can photosynthesize, but still because of deficiency of certain nutrients it has to depend on the host plant. So these organisms that depend on the host plant for nutrients are called parasites. Now nutrition in unicellular organisms. So we are going to talk about two of them, amoeba and paramecium. Amoeba uses pseudopodia. Pseudo word means false, podia means foot. So these are projections that amoeba creates from its surface to capture the food from the surroundings. So once the food is captured, it is in the stored in the food vacuole, complex substances are broken down, and then the waste is again thrown out through the process of diffusion. So in amoeba it is the pseudopodia that helps to take in food, whereas in paramecium it is the cilia. Cilia are the hair-like structures present all over the body of paramecium. They take the food to a specific spot for ingestion, and in paramecium, now after the food has been taken in from that spot, it is digested, and surprisingly the waste is thrown out from the mouth. So it's very different from other organisms where the waste is thrown from the mouth of the paramecium. So these are the two unicellular organisms. Keywords are amoeba uses pseudopodia and paramecium uses cilia. Now let's look at nutrition in multicellular organism. So what is digestion? Digestion is basically the process of reduction of ingested food or nutrients that is converted to energy for use. So this is the basic definition of digestion. You should know the definition of what is digestion. Now let's talk of the human digestive system. The digestive system has a long alimentary canal that extends from mouth till the anus. This includes various organs that come on the way, and these organs, they differ in width. Some of them are very thin, some of them are wide. So the movement of food through these, the entire alimentary canal is very important. And the organs that assist in the entire process of digestion are pancreas and liver. So please remember the two organs or the two organs that assist in the process of digestion are pancreas and liver. Now let's come to the detail of nutrition. Again, a very important keyword, what are enzymes? Biological catalysts are called enzymes. You know what are catalysts? Catalysts are substances that increase the rate of a reaction. So biological catalysts are called enzymes. So we are going to talk of lots of enzymes here that help in the process of digestion. So we take in food from our mouths. So the process of digestion starts in the mouth itself, where the salivary glands, they produce saliva. Now this saliva, what is the function of saliva? There are two functions. It makes the food wet and soft so that it can pass through the esophagus comfortably. The second main function of saliva is it has an enzyme called salivary amylase. Now this enzyme, it breaks down starch to simple sugars before the food even moves down to the stomach. So the process of digestion starts in the mouth. The food then passes through the food pipe or the esophagus and reaches the stomach. So when the food reaches the stomach actually expands to collect all the food. Now when the food is moving all through the food pipe, there are certain muscular contractions and relaxations that are helping the food to move forward through the esophagus. So these contractions and relaxations of the muscular walls of the entire alimentary canal, not just esophagus, but stomach also, small intestine also, then large intestine also. So all the entire alimentary canal consists of muscular walls, and these muscles keep on contracting and relaxing to make the food move forward. So this movement is known as peristaltic movement. Very important keyword, you should remember this. What is peristaltic movement? Right? Now the food reaches the stomach. What happens in the stomach is, there are gastric glands. What is the name? Gastric. The word gastric is related to stomach. So there are certain gastric glands present all throughout the lining of the stomach, all throughout the walls of the stomach, that release three things. The first one is HCl. HCl provides acidic medium for breakdown of food. Second is pepsin. Pepsin is an enzyme that helps in digestion of proteins. And the third one is mucus. Now HCl, what is HCl? Hydrochloric acid. So there are two functions of HCl. First is it helps in killing of germs, and secondly, main function is it provides the acidic medium so that pepsin can work. So pepsin is an enzyme that works in the acidic medium, and this acidic medium is created by hydrochloric acid that is secreted by the gastric glands. So there are mainly three secretions of the gastric gland: hydrochloric acid, pepsin and mucus. Now what is the role of mucus? Sometimes we stay hungry for longer durations, we don't eat food very regularly or at regular intervals. So what happens is the HCl is being secreted regularly. So in absence of food, it will start irritating the lining of the stomach. So the mucus is there to protect the lining of the stomach from any harm by hydrochloric acid. And in worst cases, sometimes hydrochloric acid even travels up the esophagus and it causes burning sensation in your chest. So that is acidity. So it is very important to address the concern of acidity, and mucus to some extent takes care of it on its own. Now after the food here is acidic. This acidic food passes on to the small intestine. So after stomach, the food goes to the small intestine, where there are three components that work on this food now. The first thing is bile juice, second is pancreatic juice, and the third is intestinal juice. So there are three things that work in the small intestine to make the process of digestion complete. The first one is the bile juice. What is bile juice? Bile juice is the secretion of the liver that is stored in the gallbladder temporarily Whenever food reaches the small intestine, this bile juice is transported to the small intestine to work. Now the first very important function of bile juice is emulsification of fats. What does this mean? This means it breaks down bigger fat globules to smaller ones. Why this is needed? So that the surface area for digestion of these fat molecules, it increases and they can be effectively broken down further by further enzymes. So this process is called emulsification of fat, where larger globules are broken down to smaller globules. The second function of bile juice is to make the food alkaline, because the food was acidic in the stomach because of HCl. Now it has to be made alkaline so that the pancreatic juices can work properly. So pepsin needs acidic medium, whereas pancreatic juice, the enzymes in the pancreatic juice, they need alkaline medium. So now the food has to be made alkaline for the pancreatic juices to work properly. Now what is the role of pancreatic juices? Pancreatic juices contain two enzymes, very important, trypsin and lipase. Trypsin, as you can see, the word is ending with sin. Pepsin is also ending with sin. So the enzymes, both the enzymes are there for digestion of proteins. Pepsin, proteins, trypsin, again breakdown of proteins. So trypsin helps in breakdown of proteins and lipase helps in breakdown of fats. So these are the two enzymes that are major components of the pancreatic juice, right? Now the last one, intestinal juice. So if you have a question on digestion that is taking place in the small intestine, you have to write about all three of them: bile juice, pancreatic juice, intestinal juice. So this intestinal juice, this is secreted by the walls of the small intestine. Now this is finally responsible for breaking down of proteins to amino acids, carbohydrates to glucose, fats to fatty acids and glycerols. So these are the simpler forms of proteins, carbohydrates and fats. Again, from MCQ perspective, you should remember the simpler forms of proteins is amino acids, simpler form of carbohydrates is glucose, fats is fatty acids and glycerol. And these simpler forms, they are then absorbed from the small intestine into our bloodstream, because the intention is eventually to transport all these nutrients to the entire body. So these simpler forms of foods are absorbed from the small intestine into the bloodstream, and the lining of the small intestine for this has numerous villi. Villi are finger-like projections on the lining of the small intestine that increases the surface area for absorption, and these are lined with heavy network of blood vessels so that absorption can take place effectively. So the first structural benefit of villi is that they increase the surface area for absorption. Second benefit is that they are lined with dense network of blood vessels, because of which the absorption becomes very efficient. Now when the nutrients, they are absorbed into the bloodstream, they are used for getting energy, for building up new tissues and for repair of the old ones. So these are the three basic energy needs for any cell. We need energy for building up new tissues and repair of old tissues, even though there are lots of other activities that need energy. So basically the nutrients are absorbed from the small intestine into the bloodstream, and from there they are carried to all cells of the body wherever they are needed. After the small intestine, the unabsorbed food, absorption has taken place in the small intestine. Now the unabsorbed food passes through the large intestine. Now in the large intestine, no digestion is taking place. Digestion is already completed in the small intestine. Please remember, digestion starts in the mouth and ends in the small intestine. Large intestine only helps in absorption of water. And then the unabsorbed material or unabsorbed waste is then thrown out from the body, from the anus, regulated by the anal sphincter. Again, anal sphincter is a muscle that controls the throwing out of the unabsorbed food. Again, important from MCQ perspective. Here we have a reasoning question also. In herbivores, herbivores have a longer small intestine. Why? Because the food they eat is plant-based food, and plants, they have a cell wall. Plant cells have cell wall made of cellulose. So they have to digest food that has cellulose, which is difficult to digest and takes longer to digest. So that's why they have a longer small intestine as compared to carnivores, because carnivores mainly eat meat, which is easier to digest. So herbivores They eat cellulosic food which is difficult to digest, it takes longer, so that's why they have longer small intestine. So this is a reasoning question which is very important. Now throughout this process of nutrition, there was something called dental caries. We need to talk about dental caries also. So in our mouth, we have 32 teeth. And the outermost layer of every tooth is enamel and the second layer is dentine. Now when there is leftover food, when we don't brush our food before sleeping, mama keeps on reminding, brush your teeth before sleeping, but we don't listen. So when we don't brush our teeth before going to bed, the leftover food in the teeth is acted upon by bacteria present in the teeth. So the bacteria, it breaks down that leftover food and releases certain acids, and these acids, they corrode the enamel and dentine. So this leads to cavities or caries in the teeth. Again, one keyword, plaque. What is plaque? So the leftover food particles along with the mass of bacterial cells together is called plaque. If you go to the dentist sometimes tells you there is plaque deposition on your teeth and you need to get scaling done to remove that plaque. So what is plaque? It is not just the leftover food, but along with that the mass of bacterial cells, that is called plaque. So this covers the entire process of nutrition or digestion. Another thing, there is another sphincter balance which I left out here. When the food is passing from the stomach to the small intestine, there is another sphincter muscle here that controls the movement of food into the small intestine. The entire food cannot go to the small intestine together in one go, right? So it has to go slowly and gradually. So this is controlled by a sphincter muscle that is there at the junction of the stomach and the small intestine. So overall there were two sphincters, one from stomach to small intestine and the last one is the anal sphincter at the end. So I hope you understood this process of nutrition. It is very easy to remember if you can go through the entire diagram, entire flow, and if you narrate it like a story to anyone around you. Hold on, go to your parents and tell them the entire story. Entire process like a story and you will be able to learn it. Right? So let's move to okay, respiration we'll cover in the next video. So I hope that's enough for today, and if you really like the video, don't forget to click the like button and subscribe to Boundless Maths. And if the video was really helpful, don't forget to share it with your friends also. For a copy of your notes, you can visit the website www.boundlessmaths.com. And till then, keep learning, keep growing. So in the next video, we'll talk about the next life process, that is respiration. So stay tuned. Have a nice day. Thank you.